Do you ever wonder if homeschool is a good choice for you? Comment below with your questions, concerns, or ask about setting up a time to discuss how to start your homeschool journey.
Do that.
Yeah.
Well, tell me a little bit more about how have your children adapted, to these changes academically and socially. And I'm sure you're very aware that the the socialization issue is a big one. As far as taking kids out of the traditional setting where they're around other kids all the time every day. You did mention that they had some in-person learning. But what are some of the changes that they've seen and academically, socially, emotionally? We talked about motivation, but other changes that you've experienced.
Yeah, I think, look, like any change, there's going to be a bumpy period, right? And so it wasn't as though we started in January and everything was smooth sailing. And there's certainly a rhythm that you have to get into. And I think once we sort of established that and they understood what the expectations were every week, it made everything much easier. But there was a learning curve for them and for me. But once they became comfortable with how their day was going, it became much easier. And to your point earlier, obviously, the school day setting in a traditional institution is set up really to facilitate parents going to work all day. And kids who are homeschooled don't have to do the same number of hours of learning as you would in a traditional institution. And so, they could take an hour for lunch instead of 25 minutes, and they could make their own lunch and have a break, and that was okay, and it didn't slow their progress or their momentum. And so once they saw those small little rewards, if you will, and that they weren't grinding through a day just to get through the hours, it became much better and much easier.
All right. And do they, like I said, as far as the socialization,
Yeah.
is that something that you've thought about? Like, have you had to work at making those opportunities, or do you feel that, how is
Yeah.
that aspect?
So I know that's a big concern for parents. I hear that from a lot of people. My position is that you can facilitate as much socialization for your child as you're willing to do for them. And so I wasn't concerned about it at all. Both of my boys are in competitive athletics. And so
Mhm.
obviously that takes up a huge amount of their time and it provides a lot of socialization for them as well. Um,
Okay.
and, if we go out, they're interacting with people all the time. And
Mm.
it's not a concern for me at all. And yes, okay, they're not in a school setting where they're around similar age children all day long, but that doesn't mean that they don't have valuable relationships and a core group of friends. And it doesn't mean that they're socially inept or awkward for not having been in that environment for the last 6 months.
Yeah. And tell me real quick about your work. Such like, are you working at home, or how did that have to adjust?
Yeah, I was working from home, correct.
Okay. Oh, so you work from home now.
Correct.
Okay. How has that impacted your work, or your kids are pretty independent with
There
their school, or?
Well, both, I think. I think that when they're doing and learning, I'm doing working. So it kind of mirrors up a little bit. And if there's something they come to where they have questions or concerns, they can set it aside until I have a free 10 or 15 minutes. Sometimes, if it has to wait until later in the day, then we do it that way as well. So just keeping in mind to be flexible so that I can meet the demands that I have and they can get the help that they need when they're doing their work. But I think that a huge component of homeschooling, frankly, is that it has taught them to be more independent and
Mm,
self-reliant because
mm,
um, I think in a traditional classroom setting, they almost were always kind of uh, looking to the teacher for the answers.
mm.
And now they're more comfortable and more willing to try to explore ways to find those answers themselves.
That's great. Let me ask one question. When you are making, do you tell your children like in the morning? Do you say, okay, this is what you need to get done? And then do you make a schedule for them, or do they make their own schedule? Kind of how does that
A little
work?
bit of both, right? And so, um, and again, this is the beauty of homeschool because you can meet children where they're at. And so my one son prefers for there to be a schedule that's laid out for him that's more clear because that helps him to feel less overwhelmed. Whereas my other son prefers to do things in an order that makes sense for him. And
Hmm.
so in that case, I will write out what the expectations are for the day, but he gets to decide the order that he does it in. If he wants to spend 15 minutes on something and then move to something else, that's up to him. And it teaches him to be independent and responsible in terms of his time and in terms of being accountable for the results.
Yeah, I prefer that too. I prefer to just give the assignments and then just say, okay, it has to be done by this time, but that doesn't always. I have that
No.
same issue. One that works for one,
Yeah.
it doesn't, and I want him to get there, please,
Yeah.
because that would be easier for me. But sometimes I have to kind of help make the schedule a little bit more. And tell me real quick. So you are married, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Does your husband help, with this? And then what is like
Yeah.
also you said, so I guess you're going over their work every night. So you're
Mhm.
seeing, what they're doing. Is that different for you versus like at school where they were just kind of, doing it, maybe you didn't know exactly what was going on? And then what is the role of your husband, in this? Does he also help review the work, or is that are you kind of handling that?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of myself as like the school administrator. I'm the organizer and the facilitator, and he is like the special projects man. So he will give them unique things to do, unique little projects to do that kind of stretch them outside of traditional things. Writing essays about what they think they might want to be when they grow up and what would it take to get there in terms of college education, who were other influential people in those fields. And so he kind of stretches them in a different way that is much less traditional than you have to take this math class, right? Which is where mom, the principal, comes in. So
Hmm.
I will say that when my kids were in traditional school, I found it virtually impossible to keep track of their work because schools these days, they use so many different online modalities and you have to check in 3 different places. And even for me as a parent, a working parent, I thought that was really overwhelming. I find it much easier to understand what they're responsible for now, what they're working on, and what their results are because I'm more involved directly. I know what their day
Hmm.
looks like. And
Hmm.
so the process is not so much they do the work during the day and I check it at night. There's more of an ongoing education and I'm more involved along the way. And so it doesn't accumulate in the same way that it does in public school when you're having to check 3 different places all at once.
Right, and then if they're getting behind, you're seeing it
Yes,
sooner, also not waiting to hear about it or not waiting till a test, a month later that they fail, and then it's, "Oh, wait, I didn't," and that's, "Oh, I didn't understand this all this time."
absolutely.
So, yeah, that's definitely a benefit to me is knowing, what's going on and being able to make the adjustments or, slowing down or speeding up, whatever, is gonna work
Do
there.
you ever wonder if homeschool is a good choice for you? Comment below with your questions, concerns, or ask about setting up a time to discuss how to start your homeschool journey.